everybody. We are so excited to be joining you once again. We are here still at the beginning of Women's History Month, or Her Story Month, as so many people love to call it. My name is Devora Governale.
And I'm Carrie Parker.
And today we are so excited to do both a throwback and also kind of a modernized version that is out there of the incredible films Mean Girls. I'm going to kick it over to Miss Carrie.
Yay! So I did watch both the straight, as we call it in theater, meaning non-musical, and the musical versions in order to prep for this. So one of the interesting backstories that I'm going to throw out, because it has been brought up multiple times. So Tina Fey is most associated with Mean Girls as the writer, but ultimately it was inspired by a book. So there have been multiple accusations, and of course, journalists love to blow this up, about the idea that Tina Fey essentially gets all of the credit for Mean Girls. When in reality, you look at this scenario, which I did because here we are, right? Because she not only took it from a film, but she took it to stage musical, and then the stage musical became another film. The reality is that the book itself is not a narrative. It's not, you sit down and read it and it has the characters. It's actually a self-help book, and it was written for parents to be able to engage with their adolescent girls and this social dynamic that's going on amongst adolescent girls. So essentially, Tina Fey then took this concept and she made the narrative story for it. So in reality, Tina Fey did in fact write the story of Mean Girls, but she used the principles and concepts laid out in this book by the original author. So that was an interesting thing to kind of see, because there have been a few times that it's been brought up like the original author wasn't getting enough praise for it. She wasn't getting any of the royalties, especially for our ladies, because Tina Fey's been so involved and she is making her way up in the world. She started on SNL, and then she did 30 Rock, and now she's here, right? She is at the top of the food chain. There were people who wanted to try and claim that she wasn't doing it in the most ethical of ways, or that she wasn't as supportive of women as she might seem. But the reality is that it does seem that she was genuinely getting the praise that was deserved for writing the story, because it's not like the book itself had any of that story content. So that's our background story to all of this, which started in 2004. So another fun angle about it, our cast. So for most of us who SNL is a fun, happy place, we often see how the comedians on SNL will start having an outside SNL career, right? Tina Fey is one of the most interesting, though, because she was so integral in writing. She was Weekend Update. She wasn't typically in the skits as often, but that also then totally gave her the platform for 30 Rock, which became a great voice for modern women trying to make it in production. Because as stage managers, I was like, that's so real. All of it's so real. So she finally kind of stepped out. This was one of her movies that she took the hub for. And we have a lot of SNL alums. We have Amy Poehler. We have Tim Meadows. I love and adore Tim Meadows. But the interesting part is the ages of the cast, because as we're watching it, we all love Rachel McAdams. I adore Rachel McAdams. In reality, she was 26 when she played this role of a high schooler, right? But she did it perfectly, which is also the flip coin of Rachel McAdams. She's not the nice girl in this one, and it's my probably least favorite Rachel McAdams role because of that, because she is so relatable. But she did Regina George so well. I'm glad that she didn't get cornered as kind of the villainous female. I'm glad that she was able to walk away. Notebook definitely helped, but that reality of the ages are a little interesting. The rest of her peers are more mine and Devorah's age range, that early 80s babies. So Jonathan Bennett, who is our love interest. He's actually gone on now. He does a lot of Hallmark stuff. He's also openly gay, which I love and adore because we'll also compare that in a little bit to the 2004 version and the 2024 version, because in the 2004 version, as was part of society at the time, the status quo, the idea that at the end, Janice ends up with a boy, that was your happy little button at the end of most comedies, right? That everybody ends up paired off, everybody finds their partner or their equal. In that time, it was just the idea that Janice was such an outcast, and it was like, who is she going to end up with? And she ended up with the mathletes kid. It was totally adorable. I loved it, right? It felt like a good, happy ending for everybody. At the same time, we then have the modernization and they come up with a completely different solution. No spoilers. So, but we had Lacey Chabert and Amanda Seyfried round out the plastics. And we all know that Amanda Seyfried went on to do the Mamma Mia musicals and how fabulous those were. And Lacey Chabert, who I mean, Party of Five was probably the earliest I had ever seen her. I remember her being associated with Jennifer Love Hewitt so often, like how similar they looked. They looked like they could be sisters, etc. That was definitely a thing that was used early in her career. But now she also is like Miss Hallmark. She's got a lot of Hallmark movie channels. My mother loves her, and it's so adorable to see that progression and how mom loves Lacey Chabert. And I'm like, do you even remember? I remember that she was on Party of Five with Scott Wolf, but that's fine. Everything is fine. We're old. So in 2004, this was a little bit of a different story. We had seen like Clueless, Breakfast Club, Pretty in Pink. Some of the high school stories established those concepts of your social dynamics within high school. So we're going to take it back for a second. We're going to make sure that we understand the difference between what Mean Girls and all other movies, Heathers, etc., are establishing in those moments when we do those pans of the cafeteria and we see all the different groups. That is sociology. Ding, 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 vocab word. Okay, so let's remember sociology versus psychology, because psychology and sociology are very, very similar. Their Venn diagrams have a lot of overlap, but the reality is that, and I quote, sociology is the scientific study of human social life, relationships, and institutions. Institutions meaning schools, right? Like facilities and places that we go on the regular that are part of our routine and our day-to-day life. So that could also be work, that could be whatever, right? The military is an institution, our college programs, those are institutions. So any broader system like that is considered an institution. So how we as humans connect and find our ways to survive within those groups, that's sociology. So how those groups then also communicate and exist with each other is also sociology. So psychology is the scientific study of the mind and behavior. Yes, yes, and there's so much more to it as well. We're growing every single day when we look at these. I think at this point, the happy umbrella is behavioral sciences. And so if we look at behavioral sciences, it clumps all of those in so we can look at that. I've actually looked at it. Economics is even considered a behavioral science, which is very interesting to me. But along with anthropology and other things that look at the evolution of human groups and civilizations over time, because that's what Mean Girls actually does, which is the brilliant parallel that Tina Fey brought in with that dynamic from the original book, which is queen bees and wannabes. So the idea of what groups we make in high school to try and survive. Also low key, what kind of social dynamics and empathy we are capable of at that developmental stage as humans. And that's the reality is no matter how much we learn, we're always going to keep adjusting that because we will always keep learning more and we will fine tune how these groups move together a lot better, which is the moral of the story itself. With that, I'm going to kick it over to Dee.
I mean, it really is so fascinating that the choice was made to have the leading character be someone who is essentially completely detached from American culture for all of her life. For the 16 or 17 years that she's been alive, she hasn't had any real contact with a lot of that social construct. And so for me, it's very fascinating to see this character essentially kind of get sucked into a lot of the things that those of us who did grow up in the American public school system, the things that became the norm, whether we liked them or not, usually we did not like them. The fact that she just so quickly gets sucked into a lot of those destructive behaviors and negative behaviors. And to me, that is trying to indicate that it is something that us as women is kind of just naturally in there. We kind of are always living at a fork in a road. Are we going to choose the more elevated path? Are we going to support each other? Are we going to be there for each other? Or are we going to kind of give into that lower level and kind of, become the gossipers, become the backbiters? And I really love Tina Fey in both versions, 2004, 2024. She has a scene where we're kind of culminating that like climactic time, all of this negative behavior that's been building throughout both versions. They both culminate in Tim Meadows coming in as the principal. Oh, I agree with you. I love Tim Meadows so much. He's so fantastic in both of them. And so he basically does all right, everybody to the gym, let's go. Tina Fey as the teacher in both. Also, costume note, I thought it was adorable that they clearly consciously made the choice to select a blouse that was almost identical, both for her and for Regina George. I don't know what it was about that. That just tickled me that in both the 2004 and the 2024, both of those characters' costume was so close to identical. But she has everybody close their eyes. All of these juniors in high school, females, are all sitting on the bleachers. She has everyone close their eyes and said, everybody raise your hand if a girl has ever said something bad about you behind your back. And of course, everybody raises their hand. She has them open their eyes. They all look around and they're kind of surprised. Oh, okay, I'm not alone in this experience. I'm not some solitary victim. And then in both films, she asks, have you ever said something bad behind the back of a friend? And again, they all raise their hands. And I would imagine that that's a pretty relatable and universal experience. I think that that is so true to literally everybody. But I do feel like it's very interesting from the 2004 to the 2024. There's one main difference that she did make in that scene. In the 2004, after they do this little experiment with the hand raising, she says, okay, there's been some girl on girl crime here. And she says that you guys have to stop calling each other names. It essentially just gives permission to other people to call you names. But in 2024, we got a little bit of an update. She changed that. And instead it says, it seems like we could take a break from being victims in this situation and start taking responsibility for our own actions. I think that was very poignant that she made that shift, something that was a little more casual, and then something that I think has just been observed a lot more recently. And then both films have a scene that's similar. It's done in a little bit different way to each film, but essentially it's the same content for both, where their point is also made. It's by Katie in the 2004, and it's by Tina Fey's character in 2024. And she points out that calling people names is not going to make you better. So calling somebody fat's not going to make you more thin. Calling somebody dumb is not going to make you more smart. And not only is it not going to make you better, it's also technically not going to take away any of their capabilities. And in the meantime, it's also not going to make you any happier. The 2024 says it's just kind of like a waste of time. It's a waste of time to put your energy into that. And the 2004 says what you really should be doing is solving the problem that's right in front of you. And then both films have it end in a math equation context with the line, the limit does not exist. And to me, I feel like that's kind of the embodiment of the moral of the story, the point of these films, the, like Carrie said, the straight play and the musical. You know, as women, we do have the power to literally be limitless. We are capable of anything. And when we join together, we are super capable of anything. So I appreciate this film as a cautionary tale. They even sing that in the opening number. It's a cautionary tale. You know, this is a film that's intended to remind us that while we can be capable of functioning on that lower level, we also are capable of elevating ourselves and supporting one another. And, you know, just, you know, women supporting women is what we want to strive towards. So I love these films for that. But yeah, I thought that was so interesting to be able to kind of compare. The musical is very similar to the first one. The dialogue's almost identical. You of course have some elements of it that get modernized. Some things that maybe didn't age very well got dropped, and obviously there's a lot of songs. But to be able to see the contrast specifically with those couple of scenes, I thought was so interesting to be able to see. But yeah, back over to you, Ms. Carrie.
You are absolutely right, though, because you made a comment earlier about how in the movie version, we hear the inner monologue, right,
Mhm.
of Katie. And ultimately, in the musical, what they do is they switch it where it is not narrated by Katie, but it's actually Janice and Damien. And so that idea that they are the ones, this is a cautionary tale. And I love how Janice keeps trying to say, someone dies. And Damien's like, nobody dies. And I'm like, but let her have that, dude. Like, it's the suspense, okay? It's just for the melodrama. And that's like the
Okay.
hilarity of the juxtaposition is that Damien's essentially reining Janice in on the melodrama. But it is adorable. I actually love both pairs in both movies. I love Lizzie Kaplan and Daniel Franzese as the original pair. And then in the sequel, it is, I looked this up on purpose because we cannot let Moana down. But, and if The Rock can do it wrong, I feel okay about the fact that it's going to take a little bit of practice, but it's Ali'i Cavalier. Cravio?
I
Do it.
feel like the emphasis was a little towards the end when I watched the YouTube video, but I don't know.
It
I know girls
was
who knew her when I lived in Hawaii, but I don't know that I can say it correctly.
Yes. And that's the fun. But I feel confident. I love that The Rock was like, but I say it with confidence. And she's like, still doesn't make it right. But okay, this is fine. I'm on a press tour with The Rock. What am I gonna do? So, but she's adorable. Anyways, and I think that honestly, she was a great choice because she is such an empowering female voice, literally and figuratively. The idea that she has such a great vocal presence, which we know from Moana, but then to bring it into this angle and for this narrative and the role that she plays in this narrative because I love how she kind of becomes the voice in the pep rally. So we see that swap from the original to the musical that when she gets up there to apologize and she essentially calls out all the stuff that they did to Regina, she then goes off on a whole entire song and it doesn't end the same way. There were a few things that I felt they kind of cut short in the movie, but again, that reality of you took a movie, you Broadway musicaled it, and then you movied it again, it's gonna things are gonna get cut because the reality is musicals are done with the intention of an intermission. I literally wrote down in my notes while I was watching the movie musical intermission, like where would it have been? Because I'm that nerd who looked up the music list from the Broadway musical and was like checking off the songs as they went along. And I was like, okay, we definitely skipped some stuff. That's fine. But they did a good job in the fact that you didn't feel the intermission. You didn't feel where that cut would have happened, so it flowed pretty well. It didn't feel like a first half and a second, but they definitely did some interesting things. So a couple of the points that we wanted to make, I know we both identified that reality of Katie comes from Africa and she literally starts seeing the parallels in the behaviors of the kids with those of the animals, right? The watering hole, like all of that imagery that's brought back. Because the reality is that it's done in so many ways. Every single animation studio ever has done it by comparing humans to other mammals and other creatures and our behaviors and our patterns of behavior. And it's so true and it's so real. And unfortunately, one of the big things that is in this, whether we want to admit it or not, is the fact that every single female is typically setting themselves up for failure by trying to get a man's attention or approval. Like literally Gretchen the whole entire time is chasing this boy, like, and it's so silly. And I really was like shipping her and Kevin at the end of the musical because I was like, that's the happy ending we need on that one, that Gretchen gets the mathlete and he just adores her and it'll be great. It was really funny how in the first one he said he didn't date white women essentially, like, but women without a little bit of spice. So that was adorable. And I love how at the end he asked Lizzie Kaplan's Janice if she was Puerto Rican. She's like Lebanese. And he's like, I'll take it. I was like, wow, he's committed. Anyways, in the end of the musical, instead, we see Janice actually end up taking out a very, very gorgeous black girl to whatever the spring fling was, that what it was called?
I
Um,
think
but they're both in suits which look so amazing and sharp. I loved how in the original we had Janice and Damien both were matching suits. That was really cute.
I love
All
Damien in both of them so much. Damien in the
yes.
first always felt like looked like Ben Affleck's little brother, and I just love him so much. And oh my heavens, the new Damien, I was like, oh, can I just like put you in my pocket and keep it with me all the
The
time?
new
Oh, they both were.
Damien is adorable and amazing. That whole idea that Damien in 2004 was the safe representation of a queer man. We knew them in high school, most of us. We understood the trying to figure out our role and our place in the world because I think that's half the battle. In LGBTQ identities, it takes so much self-awareness. It takes so much courage to genuinely consider all of the angles of your own personal identity. And the fact that Damien, the character in this, he's pretty solidly aware and confident in it and knows his self-worth and he's empowered, I think is great, especially considering 2004. But again, love that we moved it forward even more for 2024 and that reality of this shouldn't be that difficult. It shouldn't take pulling teeth to get this representation out there. But welcome. We're the millennials telling you this is what it was, guys. This is what we got raised with and this is how much further it's progressed. So, we're just going to keep it moving and keep it going. And I love that Janice got a girlfriend essentially for the 2024 modernization. But you are right. There were different things. I loved actually the modernization of the wet look because I love that Damien literally is like, we've done all this and all we've essentially done is brought back the wet look. And I'm like, did we need to bring back the wet look? But I love it. Like, I love that that was kind of the side joke in it, you know, but there's a huge statement in the fact that Katie's really good at math and she is very smart for being homeschooled and the fact that she's in calculus in high school that early, but then she throws all of that away to impress a boy is literally the female downfall. right? The idea that almost every single thing that the mean girls were doing to each other was superficial and it was for superficial male attention and approval is it's tragic. It's super tragic. But when we go back to Katie being in Africa, that reality of, but why? Because when we boil it down to being mammals and creatures on the planet, our survival is ingrained in us instinctually about procreation. So the idea that we as females are naturally going to look at boys and go, I want the one who looks like he's going to make the best offspring with me. And then we eventually learn and grow and realize there's way more to it. High school, we're definitely in that developmental phase where all of those superficial things, the fairy tale romance concepts all get exploited and we lose ourselves a little bit. And that's exactly what Mean Girls is about. And Tina Fey managed to do that pretty well, pretty concisely. I do love that there is a denouement in the first one. So the first one has the wrap up. We had the climax. We saw the resolution, right? Everybody survived the climax. The denouement is the what happens after that. How do we wrap up all of this? It's a fancy French word for that closure that we get at the end of stories. And sometimes the directors and storytellers give it to us. Sometimes they don't. It's fine either way. But this one, we got the little Katie ends up being in a relationship with our boy. He went to college and she's still able to see him, and they're in a relationship, and it's so cute. But big picture, Regina George was put on a sports team. I miss that we got that one taken out of the musical because I do think, like, the point that was made of like, the jocks weren't afraid of her and she got an outlet for all of her anger. I was like, yes, because that's my day job, trying to help people find the healthy outlets for their anger, the socially acceptable ones. So there are things that we didn't get, but there's a reason Mean Girls is quoted, Kid and Loser, we're going shopping. On Wednesday, we wear pink.
Yes, we do.
Yes. Mean is easier than nice. That was a huge, huge tell me
Yeah.
what's wrong with me. I loved modern feminism walking. There were so many little lines dropped in the musical that just stung in the best ways, right? In those realistic crap, what are we doing to ourselves? I do love that Busy Phillips was cast as Renee Rapp's mother because if that's not DNA proven, I don't know what could be on this planet because they look genuinely related, like 100%. I did enjoy that one. Cyberbullying, they brought that in. They brought in the social media angle. I love the Megan Thee Stallion cameo. That was adorable. I loved the trip out of town. This time was for Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I was like, I would have picked Neil deGrasse Tyson over high school boys. Sorry, not sorry.
For real. It was also interesting that they chose she had a single mom. That was interesting.
I also found it interesting that they gave Regina and Katie a reconciliation moment in the bathroom of the spring fling. We never, and that's what the denouement essentially like fulfilled for us was that happy moment where we see them not like really angsty at each other and accepting of each other, but also acknowledging like we have our own roles and spaces and worlds. Oh, I love the fourth wall break in the gym. The girl who was apologizing to the other girl and was like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do this. There was so much pressure to get it done for the montage. And Tim Meadows looks at Tina and Tina's like, it's fine. Don't worry about that.
Hands
That
down, that was my
moment.
favorite part of the musical. Hands
That was
down.
it's so perfect. Yes. I also appreciate Tim Meadows' character was like pining for Tina in the original, and this one they're a couple, and it's cute because we get that in the gym in like 2 seconds of stuff. We get it where he's like,
You're
I need
welcome.
you to do this. Yes. And then it's like, I love you. I love you. Anyways, again, one of the reasons though that the SNL cast and that concept of like feeder chain of SNL into film and Hollywood is so great because you do see so many comedians and their relationships with these other comedians, and you can tell like they feel safe working with them, they click, like it's just easy, organic, and natural. And I think that's why we see Tim Meadows so often. I love that man. He's also a voice in Bob's Burgers. So, fun fact that I didn't do. All of the fun, this click, that click. And Regina says, I don't think we have a click problem. So, realistically, you might not have a click problem. You may have a de facto segregation problem. So, rewinding it to the cafeteria, right? When we see the pan and you see the theater kids and the horny band geeks, what have you of the descriptors, the reality is that concept of people will choose groups that they feel safe with. And sometimes those will align with racial, ethnic, cultural concepts. Why? Because it's easy. Because the idea of if I come from a Latin culture and then there are the Latin kids over here, we're naturally going to have a connection. We're going to have relatability. It's just going to be that much easier because I don't have to explain anything to this kid over here who has no clue. The idea that culture defines how we function in the world to an extent and how we perceive the world, it definitely plays into that chosen, aka de facto segregation. So, not imposed by any laws. It's how the kids found their safe places and then they developed groups of friends around it. And that's what the cafeteria feels like. You know, that's what lunch feels like, is who am I going to sit with? Where is it safe to sit? Who can I just like relax and try to eat my lunch for the next 20 minutes or whatever and not feel like I'm going to have somebody try to sabotage me. Realizing those things, though, that's why art elevates us. That's why the idea that when you look at the theater kids, the band geeks, for me, it was emo kids, punk kids, because late 90s. So, a lot of times being a military brat, moving and identifying these groups, it wasn't about the groups and my opinion of them. It was about who was going to accept me. A lot of times that was the skater kids. So when we were in Germany, the skaters were legit. They were nice to me. They were welcoming. But back in the States, it was punk, which turned into emo, some of the goth kids. So we all have those groups that identify and will accept us and welcome us. And I think that's your important part. Finding something above maybe your culture, but more looking at your expression. How do you feel safe expressing yourself? The art kids were all covered in paint, but maybe those art kids then venture out to the other groups. That's I was more of a loner because I would have like a friend over here and a friend over there and a friend over there. Like I didn't have one group. That's also just me. I like having that mixture. I don't like cliques because of the social dynamics. So,
Yeah.
but that's the moral of our story.
I love this movie. It's really just, it's so, both of them really have all the pop culture references. 2004 film has just been around for so long. I feel like it's kind of endeared in the hearts of multiple generations.
That stage of life commonality and why we see it in so many movies and stories, because high
Yeah.
school will inevitably repeat some of the same patterns no matter what we do.
We all deal with the things unique to our generation, but we also all kind of have some common thread things that, yeah, we can all connect to. Coming of age in our high school films, they're great. Plus,
Yes.
we get to see a showcase of fashion through the eras, which, of course, I always,
Yes.
and a little like, capturing the time capsules of the music that was so popular at those times. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We just love talking about films and the stories that can benefit us and what we can do to extract the important parts of them that can help us the most. And with National Women's History Month, Mean Girls just was the perfect title. So we definitely want to hear from you guys. Is this a film that you've loved? Do you love the original film more? Do you love the Broadway musical more? So yes, we definitely want to hear from you. And we're excited to keep sharing more women's stories with you the rest of this month.
Thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.